요즘 어린아이를 키우시는 분들은 아이가 몇 살쯤 됐을 때 아이에게 첫 스마트폰을 줘야 되는지에 대해서 많이 고민을 하시는 것 같아요. 특히 컨텐츠의 중독성, 도파민 중독, 그리고 소셜미디어가 아이들에게 남과 비교를 한다든지 자기의 자존감을 낮추는 등 여러 가지 부작용이 있다는 연구가 공론화되면서 이 고민이 더 심각해진 것 같습니다. 특히 미국, 유럽의 여러 국가에서는 청소년 자신들 또는 부모들의 단체가 정치가들에게 압력을 넣어서 소셜미디어 계정을 만들 수 있는 최소 연령을 국가에서 규제해달라라는 목소리가 높아지고 있고요. 실제로 덴마크, 스페인, 그리고 프랑스 같은 나라에서는 15살 또는 16살 이하가 되는 청소년들이 부모의 허락 없이는 소셜미디어 계정을 만들 수 없다라는 법안이 입법 추진 중에 있다고 합니다. 특히 학계에서 가장 강력한 목소리를 내고 계시는 분은 뉴욕대 현직 교수님인 사회심리학자 조나산 헤이츠 박사입니다. Anxious Generation, 불안한 세대라는 책을 썼는데 조나산 헤이츠 박사는 이 책에서 2012년, 즉 페이스북과 인스타그램을 청소년들이 광범위하게 사용하기 시작한 시점부터 갑자기 미국 청소년들의 자해율, 우울증, 불안증, 그리고 정신병동 입원율이 극적으로 올라갔다는 통계를 보여주면서 소셜미디어가 청소년들, 특히 여자아이들에게 얼마나 심각한 정신적 해악을 미치고 있는지를 책으로 발표를 했고요. 이런 것들이 공론화되면서 미국의 많은 학부모 그룹 그리고 청년 그룹들이 모여서 정부에 압력을 넣게 된 계기가 되기도 했죠. 조나산 하이츠 박사는 굉장히 강경하게 아이들이 스마트폰을 가져도 되는 최소 나이는 만 14살이고 소셜미디어 계정을 가져도 되는 최소 나이는 16살이라고 명확하게 얘기를 합니다. 왜 세계적으로 저명한 심리학자가 14살과 16살을 벤치마크 나이로 설정했는지 직접 줌 인터뷰를 통해서 오늘 물어보기로 했습니다. Some people who read your book might say, hey, every generation before said that next generation was doomed. Mm-hmm. Our baby boomer parents didn't understand what we were doing as Gen Xers, but you insist that this time it's different. Like some people say there are graffitis in like Egyptian tombs saying kids these days have no manners or no sense. But you said that this time the way you're worried about the Gen Z is different than the way that every other generation was worried about the next generation. What's changed?
That's a perfectly good point. Every generation thinks the one behind it lacks its virtues. But saying they have no manners, they don't live the way we do, we don't approve of the way they live, is very different from saying they are killing themselves at extraordinary rates. They are checking into hospitals at extraordinary rates. They are miserable. That's new. Mm-hmm. At least in the United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, in the English-speaking countries, it began right around 2012. I mean, 2010 to 2015 is really the key period. So this is not just adults decided that kids lacked virtues. This is teenagers became anxious, depressed, and suicidal at gigantic rates between 2010 and 2015. That's the first difference. The second difference is previously the young generation rejected the insult. Or they would say, no, no, we don't. Or they would say, with regard to technology, they say, no, we love our television, we love our comic books. Because often part of the critique is the young generation is disrespectful and lazy because of their technology, because all they do is listen to the radio or all they do is watch TV. So there's always a focus on the technology that the kids are using. But this is the first time when the kids themselves are saying, we're addicted, we're trapped, we see that this is damaging us. There are dozens of groups created by members of Gen Z. If you read English, if you go to anxiousgeneration.com, we have dozens of organizations of parents that are organizing and also of young people that are organizing to put pressure on the tech companies. So this is very different. This is not just the usual moral panic. This is that mental health of the millennial generation was actually pretty good. If you look at the graphs of all the, depression, anxiety, self-harm, all those things. If anything, things got a little better. The numbers went down a little bit from the 1990s to 2010, even to 2011. In 2011, there's no sign of a problem. All of a sudden, in 2012, it's like someone flipped a light switch and the girls go way up. They very, very sharp increase in depression, anxiety, self-harm. The boys, it's a little more gradual. It starts a little before 2012, but a little, and then it goes up a little faster. So the boys are also more depressed and anxious. But this has never happened before. There's never been such a sharp turning point where in the space of a couple of years, mental health collapsed. This is very different from any previous one.
이 책의 핵심 내용을 한마디로 정리를 하자면 책 커버에 있는 내용 Great Rewiring of Childhood라는 개념으로 딱 정리가 되는 것 같아요. 아동기의 거대한 재설계 또는 재배선이라고 해석이 될 수가 있을 것 같은데 인간이 공동체 생활을 하기 시작한 뒤 지난 수만 년 동안 어린아이들이 몰려서 노는 모습은 상당히 비슷했다고 합니다. 어른들이 열심히 일하는 동안 마을 한 구석에 아이들의 공간이 있었고, 어른들의 감시 없이 아이들은 자기네들의 공동체를 만들어서 놀기도 하고 싸우기도 하고 화해도 하면서 자기 세대들만의 사회적 규범을 배워나갔다는 거죠. 제가 어렸을 때만 해도 아파트 놀이터에 가면은 어른들이 아이들을 항상 지켜보고 있지 않았죠. 그런데 1990년대에 미디어가 발전하면서 아동 유괴나 성추행에 대한 뉴스가 많이 퍼지기 시작하면서 부모들이 실제로 범죄율이 감소하고 있는 상황에서도 아이들이 밖에서 혼자 뛰어노는 거에 대해서 극도로 불안을 느끼기 시작해서 아이들이 자기들끼리 노는 시간이 엄청나게 줄어들었다고 해요. 그 비슷한 시기에 인터넷이 보편화되면서 집에서 혼자 나가 놀지 못하고 고독하게 인터넷 화면을 쳐다보면서 어린 시절을 지내는 것을 조나탄 하이츠 박사는 플레이-베이스드 차일드후드, 즉 놀이 기반 아동기에서 폰-베이스드 차일드후드 또는 스크린-베이스드 차일드후드, 화면 기반 아동기로의 변화라고 얘기를 하고요. 이 변화의 근간에는 사람들의 인식적 변화가 있었다고 합니다. 그 인식적 변화를 조나탄 헤이츠 박사는 현실 세계에서의 과보호, 버추얼 세계에서의 충분하지 않은 보호, 이렇게 대조를 해요. 현실 세계는 우리가 상상하는 것만큼 위험하지 않은데도 밖에 나가서 아이들끼리 뛰어노는 거에 대해서는 부모가 굉장히 불안해하고, 실제로 SNS 안에 끔찍한 장면, 성적으로 문란한 컨텐츠, 아동학대범들이 다 현존함에도 불구하고 컴퓨터를 집에서 하고 있으면 내 아이는 안전한 곳에 있어 라고 생각하는 정서, 이 정서 때문에 유년기의 모습이 완전히 바뀌게 되었고, 바뀐 모습을 이 조나탄 헤이츠 박사는 The Great Rewiring of Childhood라고 얘기를 합니다.
So children need to play, and they need to play a lot. And the best kind of play is when children play together with no adult, because then there are conflicts and the children learn to work out the conflicts without an adult stepping in and saying, no, that wasn't fair. And the best kind of play is outdoors and physical. Children are physical creatures. They need to develop muscular control. They need to develop social skills, eye contact. They need to develop relationship repair skills. How do you apologize? Especially boys like to get together to practice war. Girls like to get together to bond. They do things more in pairs. They talk, they gossip more. They want to know more about social relationships. So all of that is healthy. What happens when everyone gets their own smartphone? And also the high-speed video games for the boy, the multiplayer video games for the boys. What happens? These things are so exciting. The video games are so amazing. Boys will now want to do that all the time. They're not going to get together and play. And you might say, well, but they're playing online. Mm-hmm. It's not the same. It's not physical. They're just sitting in a chair. And there is no dispute resolution. The game company takes care of everything. So you never get the arguments about, no, that wasn't fair. No, that was out of bounds. No, that was overtime. There's no argument because the program takes care of everything. So it's extremely important that kids play in groups unsupervised. And in America, in the 1990s, we freaked out about child abduction, about sexual abuse. We thought the outside world is too dangerous, and it wasn't. Crime was actually dropping. But we said it's too dangerous, let's keep our kids in. And at the same time, the internet arrived. And so we're going to keep our kids in. And look, computers and the internet, and the kids like it, and they're learning about computers, and that'll be good for their job prospects. So the millennials, born 1981 through 1995 in the US, the lines might be different in Korea. The millennial generation grew up with the early internet, and they were fine. Their mental health is fine, and they're productive. They travel the world. They start companies. But things really, really changed in around 2010 because the earlier internet was mostly just you put up information, you find information, people can write blogs. But once we get super viral social media, that's 2009, you get the like button, the retweet button, the share button. Everything now is about super viral newsfeed. Can I get 1 million people to watch this? So social media gets much more engaging and it tries to grab people and really keep them in. We get the front-facing camera in 2010 on both the iPhone and on the Samsung. We get high-speed internet and we get Instagram. That's very important. Instagram seems to really hurt girls, the constant social comparison. So they're getting constant social comparison about their beauty, their eyes, their face, their hair, their breasts, everything, constant. So that was just the background as to what happened. And that's what I call the great rewiring of childhood from 2010 to 2015. Childhood completely changed. So in all the English-speaking countries, the same thing happened at the same time. That is, levels of anxiety, depression, self-harm, and suicide rose very rapidly in the early 2010s. In Northern Europe, too, in Scandinavia, same thing happened. In Eastern Europe, mental health is actually maybe a little better. In general, in the developing world, people are getting happier because they're getting richer. I mean, when a country goes from poverty and no internet to internet and connected and joining the world market and wealth is rising, they tend to get happier. So some people say, oh, height is wrong because look, here are some countries where they have smartphones, but the kids are getting happier. Well, guess what? If you look at every country, some countries are going up, some countries are going down for economic reasons and other things. Within every country, if the country is going up, it's the old people who are going up. There used to be what's called a U-shaped curve of happiness, where the happiest people are teenagers and people in their 20s. Middle-aged people are the least happy. Old people are also much happier. That's what's been true all over the world for a long time, until 2015. We have some posts on my Substack by an economist named Danny Blanchflower. He shows that the U-shaped curve of happiness has disappeared all over the world because the young people have dropped. Now, sometimes in poor countries, everyone is going up, but the young people maybe aren't going up at all, and the old people are going up. So there are variations around the world, but you always find, as far as I know, in just about all countries, that young people compared to older people are doing worse than relative to older people. So what we found, this is work I did with Zach Rausch, who's my main researcher. What we found, we look around the world, is that the most damage was done by smartphones and social media in the countries that are most independent and individualistic. That's the English-speaking countries and the Scandinavian countries. Lots of freedom, not strong ties to community. Freedom used to be good, but when kids are not rooted in a community, and then social media comes along and it just washes them away. And so it's kids who are liberal, they're on the left, and or secular, meaning they're no religion. Those are the kids who got completely washed out to sea. They're in terrible shape. Whereas if you look at children in families that are religious and or conservative, they're much more bound in, many more restrictions. They have to go to church. They have to speak respectfully to their grandparents. They're more East Asian in a sense, more similar to a Confucian culture. As I said to you, my wife is Korean American. My family, we spent about 3 weeks in Korea in 2015. I saw many things about Korean culture. And so I think this might explain why in Korea, you have some of the most unhappy children in the world. And that's been true for decades. But when smartphones and social media came in, it's not clear that that made it so much worse because they were already having no childhood. So that's why I think Korea is different. The fact that you are more collectivist, more connected, actually gives you your kids some protection. So let's say there's one thing about Korea which I think is really destructive and you need to change. And that is the fact that your children do not get a human childhood. And this began to be true, I guess, in the 80s or 90s. And the idea of a hagwon, the idea that after a long and hard school day, you go to more school to the point where you don't get enough sleep. This is insanity. And this is harming your children, even if the internet never existed. And it seems to me that Korea is the worst in the world on this. You do not let your children have play. You do not let them have childhood. We're damaging Gen Z worldwide because we have overprotected them in the real world and underprotected them online. And in Korea, I would urge you, stop overprotecting them in the real world. Give them childhood, give them play. Now, in Korea, you also have the problem that there are not many kids around. When I was growing up, most families had 2, 3, or 4 children. So there were children in the neighborhood. Whereas in Korea, you have the lowest birth rate in the world. Very few people have a sibling. There aren't a lot of kids to play with. So especially if you have only one child, it's very important that you find ways for your child to have regular time with other children unsupervised. It's very important that you not watch over the kids. I mean, when they're 2, 3, and 4, yes, of course you should watch over them. But by the time they're 7, 8, 9, give them independence to play with other kids.
But what a lot of Korean parents do, because they think their kids need the experience, is to send them to these centers where somebody with a fancy degree in child psychology guide them through a certain type of experience. So one example, because Korea is so organized and because kids have no experience with agriculture, they set up a fake carrot farm in an indoor space. And under other supervision, they harvested carrots for that session, which then the staff replanted for the next group to harvest, right? Just in my apartment complex, there's like children's yoga center, children's capoeira, children's musical enrichment center. Kids are learning to play with native English speakers since they were 2, 3 years old, so they grew up bilingual there. And a lot of Korean parents say, isn't this better when the educated child psychologist is, guiding my child through development? Isn't that better than what we had because Korea was poor? All we had was riding around on rickety bicycles around the neighborhood in groups. And what you're saying is that riding around on rickety bicycles
it's so much better.
In groups is better.
That was so much better. So much better.
Could you tell us why
that's what kids
better?
need? Yeah, because they're being supervised by adults the rest of the day. All day in school, adults are telling them what to do. There are adults watching them. The job of a parent is to work him or herself out of a job. Children need to learn to become self-supervising, independent, functioning members of society. And if you're always supervising them all the way up to age 14, 15, 16, when are they going to learn this? The peak period to learn this. You see this all over the world. You don't see 4-year-olds running around unsupervised, but by 7, everywhere they are. At age 7, kids in many societies they can take a goat down to the river to get water. At age 7 is the age of responsibility around the world. 7 or 8 is when we need to be giving kids independence. They're being guided by adults all day long in school and guided by their overprotective parents all evening long. It is so much better for them to be out riding bicycles, falling down on the bicycles, throwing sticks at each other because they're pretending to play war. That is so much healthier. That's what kids need. They do not need more fake adult guided experiences. Find ways to get kids together. 7, 8-year-old kids, just give them a bunch of boxes and the basement. They'll figure out something fun to do. And that's the creativity. Do you want your kids to be more creative? This was a big issue when I was in Korea. There was a real effort to increase creativity. The worst thing you can do for creativity is keep them supervised by adults all the time. It just kills creativity.
I read your book, Coddling of the American Mind, when it came out, and it helped me understand a lot of things that were going on the internet at that time. And then I received your book, The Anxious Generation, from your Korean publisher, and I read it, and it just made me shudder because it's frightening to think about the kind of childhood they would have. When me and my Korean friends get together, we talk about when is the right time to give our kids their first cell phone, and when is the right time to get them start using internet. And in your book, you're pretty categorical about the age, right? You say 14 years minimum for their first fully connected smartphone and 16 years minimum before they are on image-based social media. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are wondering why an eminent psychologist would pick 14 and 16 as the benchmark age for introducing children or adolescents to the online world.
So I picked those for this reason. What we have is a giant collective action trap where everybody has to give their kid a phone earlier and earlier because everybody else did. And so my goal was not to say, if we just look at the brain development, if we just look at health, what's the optimal age? If we did that, we'd say 18 for a smartphone and 21 or 24 for social media. Social media is completely inappropriate for children. I mean, in America, we have what are called X-rated movies, like hardcore, the people having sex. We've long had a consensus that children should not be allowed into those movies. And once you give your kid a phone and social media, they're going to find hardcore pornography. They're going to find scenes of extraordinary violence, people being run over by cars, people being punched in the face, people having their heads chopped off. I mean, horrible things they're going to see. But my goal was not to say, what is the safe age? Because as you said, even we adults, life online does bad things to us, but we think adults are old enough, they can make their choices. I picked those ages because we need clear ages that are achievable as a social norm. And so the world is now expecting everyone to have a smartphone in order to navigate the world. And I think this is even more true in Korea as it is in Scandinavia. You kind of expect everyone has a smartphone, even children. So my goal was let's pick the latest age where there's a possibility that people will really be able to do it. And if we delayed smartphones till 16 or 18, people would say, well, this is impossible, in part because I want kids out in the world. I want kids exploring with no parents. And so it's totally fine with me for them to get a flip phone or a basic phone or a light phone, one of these phones that just all it does is texting and calling. That you can give your kid as soon as you let them out, give them some independence. But 14 in the United States, 14 happens to be when we transition from middle school to high school. Mm-hmm. And as a social psychologist, I'm thinking about groups. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about how at least middle school that's when the most damage is done. That's early puberty. And we really have to get it entirely out of middle school. So in Korea, I think the rule should be no smartphone before high school. So it's very important to have a norm because the whole school has to be set up so that kids don't have to have a smartphone. And for social media, I think the age should be 18 because what children see is completely inappropriate for minors, for children. But if I were to say 18, there's no way we would get it. In the United States, at 16, you're driving a car, you're out in the world. It would not be possible to delay all the way till 18. Kids are on social media by around 11, something like that. Let's just raise it from 11 to 16. Let's let them get most of the way through puberty. So that's why I chose those ages.
A lot of my friends are beginning to have children, but we talk about this. We talk about, okay, let's not send our kids to Hagwon. Let's not give them cell phone. And everybody says this until their kids are about 4, right? And then when they're about 5, they see everybody else doing it and then they cave, right? So
Exactly.
let's say
That's the collective action. That's exactly it. That's the problem.
let's say I want to let my kid play outside and I go to the playground and there's nobody at the playground.
Mhm.
My son or daughter says, hey, there's nobody at the playground. All my friends are on WhatsApp or Snapchat or whatever. Give me a phone so I can play with my friends. What do I do? Because it seems if the entire society works this way, what can I do as a parent or an individual, as an adult, so our children get back the childhood that we had?
What can you do as a lone parent? What can you do as one family, especially in an intense culture like Korea? Very little. But that's my point. That's my point. That's why you're so stuck. All of us are. I mean, it happened here, it happened everywhere. As a lone parent, this is the trap. And so the only way out of the trap is collective action. You live in an apartment building, right? How many other children within a few years are in the same building or the same area?
Probably 200 or so.
Oh, great. All right. This is what's happening in America. Every parents group, every WhatsApp group, every group in which mothers especially, but also fathers, every group, every school in which parents are connecting, they're all saying, hey, let's read The Anxious Generation together. And they all read the book. And the book scares the hell out of them, but it also shows them the exit. Here's how you get out. And so and I just got word today in St. Louis, Missouri, a big city in America, all the schools got together, like all 30 schools. They all got together. They read the book and they said, we are going phone free. We are no longer going to let children take their phones into class. They have to check it in a locked bag or in a locker in the morning. This is collective action. Now, no parent can say they're the only one because no kid has a phone in school. And it'll be the same thing with free play. If you get together with, you put up a sign in your building, hey, do you have parents, but do you have children between the ages of 6 and 12? Come on this WhatsApp group or whatever. We are arranging free play for our kids every Friday afternoon. On Fridays, nobody has Hagwon, nobody has piano lessons, and they're going to meet on the playground or they're going to meet in apartment 16B to start, but they can move to your apartment, my apartment. They can roam around without supervision. It's very important that they do not have supervision. So that's the way out. You have to act together. So don't say, try to wait as long as possible to give your kid. Don't say that because when is as long as possible? Everybody ends up at 4. Try to say, let's all agree we're not going to give our kids smartphones until 14. We're not going to let them get social media accounts until 16. Let's all agree. If you put out a clear norm, now you have a place for parents to aim for. And especially once they read the book, they're going to do it. This is happening all over the world, not just in America, not just in English-speaking countries. I just learned yesterday there's a new group in Brazil of parents who are doing this, Germany, Australia. It's happening all over the Western world. I don't know any in East Asia yet, but look, one thing I know about, a couple of things about Korea and Korean culture. Koreans are very, very hardworking and very creative in addressing major problems. So what I'm saying is, if you get a national consensus that this is a problem, if you get a national consensus that your kids are miserable and they're growing up less creative because of this, and you say this is a matter of national interest, of national competition, Korea is obviously going down in terms of your demographics. You're going to have fewer and fewer Koreans. You need to really increase your vitality. And Korea has the most vital, exciting, interesting culture of East Asia. So if you make this a matter of national pride, that you need your kids to grow up creative and dynamic, I think you're going to solve this. But the trick, the key is you have to solve it collectively. You can't just expect individual parents to break out on their own.
인간은 호기심의 동물이기 때문에 반짝반짝한 새로운 신기술이 나오면은 이거 재밌다 그러고 한번 써보고 싶어 하는 게 본성인 것 같아요. 21세기의 역사에서 가장 많은 사람들의 호기심을 자극하고 삽시간에 퍼진 것이 바로 스마트폰과 SNS 기술 아닌가 생각이 됩니다. 근데 역사를 돌아보면은 인간한테 조금의 부작용도 있지만 많은 이익을 가져다 줬기 때문에 인간이 끊임없이 계속 사용해가는 기술도 있는 반면에 어떤 기술들은 이게 인간의 삶을 더 행복하게 해주지 않더라는 결론을 내서 폐기된 기술들도 있죠. 대표적인 예가 1900년대 초반에 여러 자동차 회사들이 엔진의 출력을 높이기 위해서 연료에 납을 넣었었는데 그것 때문에 많은 아이들이 납이 섞인 공기에 노출이 돼서 지적 지체나 장애를 겪게 되는 것이 공론화되면서 이 기술은 더 이상 사용하지 않는 기술이 되었어요. 자기 다음 세대의 청소년들이 실험실의 쥐로 살았으면 좋겠다라고 생각하는 학부모나 어른들은 없을 겁니다. 그렇기 때문에 대부분의 식품이나 아니면 의약품이 청소년들을 타겟으로 출시되기 이전에는 굉장히 많은 안전성이라든지 부작용에 대한 검증이 이루어지고 승인이 난 다음에만 판매를 할 수가 있죠. 하지만 소셜미디어 같은 경우에는 워낙 새로운 것이기 때문에 그런 규제 틀이 없는 상태에서 삽시간에 청소년들 사이에 번져나갔고, 그 임팩트를 우리가 처음에 소개했던 청소년들의 우울증, 불안증, 그리고 정신병원 입원의 급증으로 보고 있다라고 조나선 헤이츠 박사는 얘기해요. 다시 말하면 우리는 Z세대라고 하는 한 세대 전체를 소셜미디어를 사회에 순식간에 퍼뜨리면 어떤 현상이 일어날까라는 가설을 실험하는 실험실의 쥐로 희생해버렸다는 애통한 마음에 이 책을 쓴 것 같습니다. 오늘 조승연의 탐구생활은 여기서 마무리하고요. 다음에는 더 재밌는 문화 역사 이야기로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 안녕히 계십시오.